Okay, guys, a lot of people liked the last video where we just went over someone else's build, and this is a build I actually have kind of been trying on standard myself, but I found someone in hardcore in my guild that uses it a lot, and they've done really well with all the content. So they've been able to complete pretty high up into the void. We'll go over that in a second. They do pretty good in the spire, and when we're on raid bosses, they're usually doing one of the top 3 in the DPS. So let's go over what you do to do something like Fire Orb Traps, because that's what this is going to be about. Let's go over the skill tree first. So Fire Orb Trap is your main skill. You awoken that with Fire Orb Trap Source. Area effect, fire damage amplification, trap projectile count. Pretty good. And then here's the skill runes he used. Quick Trap Installation Source. Increases your attack speed. Ignition Explosion Origin. Now, you might do something a little bit different when you're not in hardcore. He's using this because he gets the damage dampening, gets the burning enemies. And Trap Projectile Multi-Shot Source. And you'll see there's a lot of projectile count on all of these traps. But let's go over what projectile means with this build. So you got confidence as well. Confidence is really good for most builds. As long as you're at max life, you're just getting huge bonus. Mana Storm Verity. And then Chain. And Chain's been upgraded so much in the last few seasons that I would just keep this as like a permanent. You can switch out something for more damage on a boss if you want, but Chain is pretty good. I keep it as a permanent on a lot of my minions as well. And then the supporting skills for this, you got Shadow Provocation Source. That's going to be the vampire skin, I'm pretty sure. Yep, vamp skin. Huge way to stay alive, especially in hardcore. You're going to be throwing a lot of traps out. The creatures are still going to be kind of swarming you a little bit. So as soon as your traps are going off, this is going to help you live through things. And here's the setup for that. Quick shout. With the hush shout. Buff activation when hit. And remember, if you like to manually cast these, that's fine, but you usually use a buff activation on hit, on movement, any of those things, because you're trying to get that extra cooldown recovery speed from this. Increased duration. Time acceleration, just make it go off faster. And then over here, right below that, just live a little bit better. Tenacious regeneration. I like this in a lot of builds. You get that huge HP bonus and whatnot. You can use this any way you want, either on movement skill activation, buff activation hit. Either way works pretty well. And then we got the movement skill, Penetrating Slash. A lot of people use this, especially if you have a lot of attack speed. It's really good. It's got momentum attached to it for the damage dampening. And Disarm for the cooldown recovery. And you can awaken this to make yourself move even faster too. Final setup here is the release element. Attached to a few of the things we're using with Shadow Provocation. Time acceleration, increased duration. Versatility. Versatility is really good when you get it. The attack speed on it's great. And attack speed is really, really powerful with this build. Final thing that you're using with the release element, and this will be kind of hard to get until late game, but totem activation upon using enhanced skill. It's usually kind of a hard rune to get, but a lot easier to get nowadays than it used to be. Attached to your weakened totem. And enhanced totem. Better totem effect. And this works really well every time you use your release element. Instantly activates your weakened totem. Drops it right on the ground and feels pretty good. Here's counterattack. And as I said, you're going to throw a lot of traps out. Vampire skin's going to go off. Things are going to come in and hit you. You're going to get the counterattacks off. So all of these things really interact with each other really well. And you have to remember with traps, you don't have any buffer of things running in on you. So as soon as they group up, you need things to be able to live. So things like counterattack, penetrating slash through the group of enemies, shadow provocation, and whatnot. You'll see he uses Veil of Protection. Everybody, when you're going to use a seal, especially a defense seal, you just kind of choose whatever you want. He chooses Veil of Protection because he likes to switch between these. He's got Seal of Critical Chance Verity. This does get rid of the critical gap on the higher end maps. And then just another defensive seal. Last thing we have here, it looks like the only thing you really need with Activate Trap is the Dampen Resource. So he's got that going on, and it increases your trap damage here. And then one more defensive skill. So if you're doing the softcore build, you don't need as many defensive skill setups. You can go a little bit more offensive if you want. And your final setup, if you have enough crit, is going to be using something like Seal of Striking if you can. So that's the skill setup here. And let's go over the gear real quick. One thing about traps is that they are attack speed. So make sure you're getting as much attack speed as you can. And here's what the daggers look like. If you do a fire dagger, that's going to be from Capri, you can get the max trap install count. I'd recommend doing that, and I'd recommend running a lot of Capri because you're going to need that. You're going to also need the helmet. The helmet's really important for traps. You're going to get the simultaneous trap count and the enhanced skill rune effect. So a lot of really powerful bonuses here on the on a fire helmet. So you're running fire for your daggers. You're running fire for your helmet. You're doing that all the time. And then you have the trap skill rune level on your chest. You can get up to +4, or you can use the unique. For shoulders, he's using Light's Portrait right now. That's just to get the extra regeneration effect, and also remember hardcore. Here's what gloves look like. Burn damage amplification. And you're looking for that fire damage. And critical strike and critical damage. And then don't forget the build scales off of attack speed. That's how you're throwing your traps out. So as much attack speed as possible. Here's the boots. He's a dodge armor build, so he's trying to get as much perfect dodge as possible. And perfect dodge, just a thing not really on this build, but for people that do dodge. The more perfect dodge you have, you can eventually scale yourself high enough to where when you're in really crazy situations with a lot of hit points, like Inspire, and you have survival on, you're able to sit there and just perfect dodge over and over again. It's pretty powerful. Last things here is you got the rings. He's using a little magic find setup here, so we're just going to go over one of the rings here. And the unique necklace. So I've brought this up to him a few times, and he said that this is pretty much the best in the slot. The amount of hit points you're going to get off of it and all of the trap bonuses are really powerful. And the following effect you gain whenever a trap gets hit, the 2% of your max hit points and mana back is a big deal. So probably Destination is really powerful for your build. Last thing we want to go over is just take a look at his rune stones here. Getting some defense enhance right there. Here's a really powerful Fire Orb Trap. Check that out. It's got the 96% to Fire Orb and then the 39% to Fire Orb. And we got a increased damage when counterattack is equipped. Probably the only better thing we can really hope for here, other than something like this, is switching out something like this with an effect to make Release Element a little bit stronger, but you never can really pick your runestones. Anyway, let's take a look at the charms. So here's your charms here. Got yourself critical rate and critical damage. And for the legendary effect over here, strike damage amplification is great. But for the most part, especially if you're in hardcore, you're going for hit points, critical damage dampening, critical rate, critical damage. And if in all builds, it's going to be just damage, critical damage, and critical rate, as much as you can get. For the Chaos Star here, he's gone with Alyssa, Castor, and Capri. And was going for crit damage, is what he told me for the main part. Now, here's where the build differs from a few other builds is Alyssa, Castor, and Capri is about all you can go. And the reason why is because you can get the area effect, and this is what you're trying to get. This is what you're scaling on this build as well. So whenever you're trying to figure out how do I scale the build higher, area of effect, fire damage, elemental damage amplification. One of the issues currently with the build, and he said he's ticketed them on this a few times, is getting this projectile damage amplification. So for a season starter, this would be a really good season starter because you don't have to worry so much about the fourth charm, and they'll probably fix this eventually too. But for some reason, projectile damage doesn't seem to affect the Fire Orb Trap. I have not extensively tested this, but he's tested it every single time he gets a chance. And he said that even though there is the projectile tag here, it doesn't seem to scale with it. So that's why you're going to use this kind of setup and probably stick with that for the most part. And you're only going to be able to scale off of these 3 different charms. So I wanted to make sure people knew that ahead of time. But go ahead and take a look at the skill tree here. This is how the setup is over here on the right side. And we went over the charms just now. So next thing I want to go over real quick is just the relics. Hellfire effect is a big deal. You want to get as much fire penetration as you can. Leo right here for just the resist. Seftar for the elemental damage amplification. It does help, but this is mainly for the chaos resist. And he has Mirazetti for the resist here. So this is more of a hardcore build. You might want to switch these out just a few of these out. See if you can get a few different kind of results, but for the most part, the Hellfire effect, he's assured me is one of the best things he has on this. There you go. Just in case people were wondering about what those were. And then here, we'll go ahead and I'll let you guys see what the Zodiac Tree looks like. There's 2 different builds for this. There's one where you're going to go over here into this Zodiac Tree. And then I'll show you what the other one's going to look like for maybe when you're leveling or if you're trying out one of the other traps. All right. All right. And that's pretty much the build. This is the person here, DPS Express. They've been doing this build all season, and they've been spending a lot of time with it. So here's the alt that he's been using. The whole setup's not here, but for the most part, a few different changes for chill area trap, but you switch out a lot of the same runes. And he's also using frost trap with it. So you throw out chill area, it has a cooldown. While you're waiting for that cooldown to stop, you're doing the frost trap source, just in case people are wondering how this build works. I'll let you see kind of what the skill tree looks like here, but as you see, it is a work in progress. Still kind of the same thing going on. Twilight Destination. But we also have this unique chest. I wanted to show people that in case they were trying to figure out what they can wear while they're waiting to craft a chest. Same kind of setup with the damage. You're still going for the attack speed and everything. But one big difference here, and I just wanted to go over, is the way you build. So over here in the Zodiac Tree, this is a different kind of Zodiac setup, and you can use this for either one. This can be used for the other setup as well. It's just that he didn't have it set up at the time, and I wanted to show this. So just knowing that there are two different ways to build in the Zodiac Tree, I think is nice. Here you go. We got sharpness, acceleration. We already showed what these kind of do in the other tree. And the big difference with this tree is just right here. So here's the Zodiac stone he's using. Looks like he just kind of has a placeholder there. And like I said, it's a placeholder build. But you can see in this build where we're doing damage against debuffed enemies here. And you get the survival expert. So this wasn't in the other tree. I just thought it was interesting that you could throw a trap out in this tree and get that extra max hit points regen per second. Which, if it works a little bit like Path of Exile, if you've ever played a trapper or a saboteur in that game, the more traps you throw out, you start to get a regen effect, and it works really nice. And it works good in this game too. So just one little setup at the very end to show people. All right. Hopefully that helps people with making a trap build and the kind of things you can do. I haven't seen very many people make traps, so I just wanted to show off two little mini trap builds you could do there. The Fire Orb Trap build is far more an end game than this one is, but this one at least shows you what you can do while you're leveling. And I think that Survival Expert's just wonderful for leveling, especially for the last acts.